Hi, good morning. I want to welcome everybody to the February meeting of the League of Women Voters of Jackson County. Our speaker today is Gary Williams from the city of Carbondale. And I'm sure you will find the program very informative. If you have questions, I want you to put those questions in the chat box or the Q&A, and we'll read them, and then Gary could answer them. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan group, a political group, which is open to all citizens, male or female. And I'm now going to turn over the program to Sandy, who will introduce Gary Williams to you.
Thank you, Gail. Welcome everyone to the talk today. Gary Williams is city manager for the city of Carbondale. And as many of you know, Carbondale runs on a city manager style of government. Gary will be speaking to us about home rule, why we have to vote on it, what are the advantages, some of the disadvantages, and then we'll open it for questions. So, Mr. Williams, if you would go ahead.
Thanks, Sandy. Okay, so I have some information that I'm pleased to share with you guys. Again, thanks to the League of Women Voters for inviting me to talk about this. The city of Carbondale is pleased to provide this information as a public service to promote community awareness about home rule and its role in municipal government. The views expressed herein may not be the views of any local government body or any elected officials. So as a little background, the city of Carbondale has been a home rule municipality since 1967. Home rule status is automatically designated when municipalities have at least 25,001 residents or have adopted it by referendum. So following the completion of the 2020 census, Carbondale's new population is 21,857, which is a decline from our 2010 census total of 25,902. So what this means for us is that in order to maintain home rule status, the city of Carbondale must seek approval from its residents via a referendum. So we're required by statute to place an item on the November 8th, 2022 general election, where residents will be asked to vote on whether Carbondale should retain its home rule status. So before I talk a little bit more about the actual question and the referendum, what's the purpose of home rule? So home rule authority allows municipalities to solve city issues locally. Home rule authority permits municipalities to address local issues in a manner deemed the best for the community, with some limitations from the state constitution and state legislature. Without home rule status, municipalities may only exercise the powers granted to them by the state. So if you start to do some research too on home rule, you'll also often hear something or see something cited called Dillon's rule. And that goes back to the 1800s. It was from an Iowa attorney, a judge actually, that became the Chief Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court at one point, who had at one point made a ruling where essentially said that the thought was that local governments couldn't be trusted to take care of issues for the people, for the residents, and thereby those powers should be limited. And so the only power, Dillon's rule provides that the only power granted to municipalities are those expressly given by the state legislature, the bigger body. And so that was kind of the basis of the way that governments worked, and until the idea of home rule evolved, which the idea is to give local governments a little more authority on how they can make decisions that they deem as best for their particular community. What neighboring communities have home rule here in Southern Illinois? Well, there's a number of them, including Murfreesboro, Marion, DuQuoin, Johnson City, West Frankfort, Benton, Mount Vernon, Christopher, Carterville, Craneville, Heron, Cesar, and Sparta. You probably recognize from population that actually none of those were able to achieve it via the 25,001 population. They all did it via referendum. And actually, a little fun fact, the tiny village of Muddy, Illinois, that you guys may or may not be familiar with, that's just outside of Harrisburg, was the very first Illinois municipality to adopt home rule via referendum. So what are the potential advantages of home rule? Well, the first one is broad taxing powers. And as an example, the city's fiscal year 22 budget projects that $8,325,206 in home rule tax will be collected, which that's about 33% of the city's total revenues. In contrast, the city's real estate levy is $1,035,289, which is about 4% of revenues. The city's traditionally maintained a low property tax levy to rely on sales tax to fund operations, with the reason being that dollars spent by non-residents shift the tax burden away from residents and the reliance on real estate taxes. A non-home rule community would not have the same ability to raise taxes. They would have to do it via referendum, and you would be capped at 6.25%, which is the state tax rate. Home rule communities generally have higher bond ratings, which result in lower costs to the city when bonds are issued. So many of you that may have experience with bonds or have an understanding of bonds realize that when the cities need cash, they issue bonds, and home rule communities typically have a better, higher rating, which results in a lower interest rate. So you can probably imagine that if you do a large bond issue, which aren't uncommon when cities issue debt of $10, $20 million, a quarter or 0.5% makes a big difference on the debt service over the life of the bond. In addition, home rule allows debt without referendum, and it also allows debt to be financed beyond 20 years. The city, we can actually finance debt up to 40 years by being home rule. This can, again, lower the burden on residents by stretching out payments further. Home rule communities have no debt limit. Now, although this is an advantage to some, that may be a disadvantage, because if poorly managed, the community can accumulate an unlimited amount of debt that obviously has to be paid back at some point. Non-home rule communities, their debt is capped at 8.62% of their EAV. So currently our city's debt ratio to EAV is about 9.63%. Where this might be important to you is if you've been following the city government and some of the council actions recently, we proposed a strategy to fund our public safety pensions to 100%. We're currently at about 50%. The amount of unfunded actuarially accrued liability for the city of Carbondale is around $42 million for public safety pensions. Our non-sub public safety pensions are funded 100%. So if you understand the way pensions, public safety pensions are amortized in Illinois, it's more heavily loaded on the back end. So we're statutorily required to be 90% funded by the year 2040, and our annual debt obligation has continued to increase. And in fact, over the next 19 years, it's increasing at a rate that we believe is unsustainable. So we had proposed to City Council that to consider issuing pension obligation bonds where we would be 100% funded immediately, and we would have a lower annual payment because we would be able to avoid that actuarial ramp that we're seeing right now. And in result, the low bond rating in comparison to the assumed return on investment that our current funds are relying on, we believe we can save the city of Carbondale millions of dollars over the long haul. So the reason that that's important is because at 9.63% debt ratio to our EAV, if we were a non-home rule community right now, we would not have been able to pursue that strategy. Also, one important advantage of home rule is that it allows the city to more licensing authority and additional regulations. Many of you that are involved in neighborhood groups, we were talking earlier about the Neighborhood Alliance meeting this week, are very familiar with the City of Carbondale's rental housing registry, rental registration program. Although it's a registration program, not a rental licensing program, in many ways it operates more akin to a licensing program, because we require landlords to not only register units, but to pay an annual fee to allow us to inspect the unit when it becomes a rental, and then at least every 3 years. If non-home rule communities are not able to apply the same regulation. So communities that don't have home rule status rely on a complaint-based reactive style of code enforcement, where they cannot mandate for annual, biannual inspections or anything like that. One other thing that home rule provides is that related to the licenses is, that affects animal control. We get about 500 calls annually. Losing home rule would take away our ability to license dogs, specifically in the city of Carbondale. Now, disadvantages. One of the big disadvantages could be that municipalities have broad taxing and regulation authority. So again, depending on the community, depending on how the community is managed, home rule does provide the ability to levy sales taxes, to increase your sales tax rate, to impose new taxes. You're I'm sure familiar with the taxes that the city of Carbondale created back in 2017 to fund community investments and to help provide additional funding to public safety pensions. Those were the food and beverage tax, packaged liquor tax. The city also raised the municipal fuel tax 3 cents. So all of those taxing authorities are not permitted in non-home rule communities. In addition, the hotel tax, for example, you're capped at 5% for a non-home rule community, and those taxes can only be used for tourism-related activities, whereas non-home rule communities can levy a higher amount. So that you can imagine that goes on and on and on with liquor, cigarettes, and amusement taxes, all those types of things. Okay, so getting back to the referendum question, the Illinois Election Code mandates that the referendum question shall be stated as follows, and there's absolutely no flexibility in how we put this on the ballot. The question is, shall the city of Carbondale cease to be a home rule unit? So I'll follow that up with some frequently asked questions. And the first one, what does it mean if I vote yes on the home rule referendum question? Voting yes means that you want the city of Carbondale to lose home rule status. What's it mean if I vote no? Voting no means that you want the city to keep home rule status. How much projected sales taxes could be lost annually? Again, if the city loses its home rule sales taxes, we will have to rescind our sales taxes that are home rule taxes, unless they are tied to a debt obligation. And currently, all of ours, we only have one. We have 0.25% for the Saluki Way that we would be able to retain until that obligation is paid off. Again, the total of those taxes for FY22 was about $8.3 million, which is about 1/3 of the city's total revenue. Does home rule authority mean higher property taxes? This is an argument that some make about the broad taxing authority. Home rule status does permit the city of Carbondale to levy a tax rate without referendum. So for example, we have a little over $1 million we levy annually. If the city of Carbondale chose to double that levy or triple that levy, they could do it with simply a public hearing. It would not require a referendum. So we do not have to comply with the PTEL requirements where other taxing bodies in the county are capped at 4.99% or CPI, whichever is less. However, studies have shown, and there are many studies throughout Illinois, and there have been many studies in particular by the Northern Illinois University Center for Governmental Studies, that communities that have home rule, there's no correlation between home rule status and higher property taxes. Something else to keep in mind about property taxes is currently Carbondale's portion of the residents' real estate bill is approximately 3%. We've maintained the same annual tax levy since about 2000. And again, the council has been able to keep the levy flat by utilizing other sales tax revenues, which are also generated by non-residents. Question, do home rule communities have unlimited powers? No, home rule powers are limited. For example, in taxation, they can't impose income taxes. The regulations must relate to local government affairs and cannot regulate on issues already exclusive to state government. However, home rule does provide flexibility to communities to enact laws that best serve their local interests. For example, non-home rural communities can only hire public safety personnel through an independent board of fire and police commissioners. We currently have a board here at Carbondale. However, as a home rule community, the board helps us maintain a list, but we can make the decisions on who is hired. Home rule communities have the ability to hire or replace police chiefs outside of the board of police and fire commissioners, fire chiefs as well. You may know that many years ago, the city of Carbondale increased the size of their city council from 5 to 7 members. They did that because they were a home rule community. And one thing that comes up quite often, it's actually probably one of the biggest requests we get, is speeding in Carbondale, and in particular in various residential neighborhoods. If we, as a home rule community, we can reduce the residential speed limit to 25, which we've done in numerous times. We did it just a few months ago in an area of Sunset. And if we were non-home rule, we would not have the ability to change the speed limit. How does home rule authority affect funding for local schools? It actually has no effect on Carbondale school districts because they are independent taxing bodies and they provide their own funding through property tax. However, the tax advantages of home rule have benefited Carbondale schools. In 1999, the city of Carbondale and the high school entered into agreement for the city to provide $16 million in funding for a new high school. And to meet this financial obligation, the city exercised its home rule powers and adopted a 1/4% sales tax to provide the needed revenue. And this finance strategy allowed the high school to move forward with the project without financing it through additional property taxes. And then finally, how do residents oversee the use of home rule? Well, this is really more through the democratic and voting process where citizens are encouraged to participate in meetings. They can address the city council with concerns they have. And all citizens can contact council members and city employees anytime, with questions or comments or any information you need on home rule. So that is all I have in terms of information about home rule. And again, you can get really deep into this. There are so many details throughout the Illinois Municipal Code. But these are some of the most popular, and these are probably the most commonly used exercise powers of home rule communities that I wanted to touch on that I thought were relevant to our community.
There was a question in a Q&A. How will the city operations change if the home rule is lost?
Well, that's a great question. So again, our total, I'll go by FY22, our current fiscal year. We budgeted about $25 million in revenue, and our expenses were about $25 million. And again, 1/3 of the revenue came from home rule sales tax. So about 8.6 million. So if we lose that 8.6 million, the question is going to be, what services do we want to lose? That's a huge hit. And so what I would tell you is if we were required to lower our budget by 1/3, there would have to be drastic cuts and loss of service to city residents. The only other option that we would have is, if we want to maintain the exact same level of service, is let's fast forward and hypothetically the referendum fails in November. November and December is actually when the city council does a real estate tax levy. So we would still retain home rule status at that point. So likely what we at the staff level would do would be to propose to council to do a rather large property tax increase to to be able to continue to provide service for the following fiscal year.
One of the first questions was, is it a simple majority to pass home rule?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Gail, did you want to ask the next one?
Have you seen if the home ownership in Carbondale has gone up have been affected by home rule sales tax? In other words, is the sales tax keeping property taxes semi-stable, and has this affected home ownership, or what do you see?
I don't have any data that relates property tax or sales tax directly to home ownership. We've maintained about the same home ownership rate for a while, which is around about 70% of our housing. It's a little higher than that is rental housing. But again, being a home rule community, the city council has made the decision since at least 2000 to maintain a low real estate tax levy around $1 million a year and rely on the sales tax. They've just been very, if you follow city councilmen, you know our council is very respectful and mindful of the real estate tax burden to our residents.
How will the city inform the voters of the referendum?
Mm-hmm. Well, we can put out information, but community groups like the League of Women Voters or like whoever, committees can be formed to help put the word out. We can only provide general information like what powers does home rule give to the city of Carbondale, and what powers would it take away. We can't advocate for or against home rule. And you'll certainly see, if you do any research at all, you'll see around the state and country that whenever there's a referendum for home rule, oftentimes there's groups pro and con that are lobbying for their positions.
I have a question. Since we already know that we are below the trigger number, have we already lost our home rule status? If not, when would it go into effect pending the referendum?
Yeah, so we keep it until the referendum. And again, if we were to assume that the referendum fails, it's not until the county clerk has filed all the final tallies and all that. And I believe the date that we got from the Illinois Municipal, it's typically about 45 days after the referendum that we would technically lose home rule.
Right.
Is the 1% Jackson County sales tax that passed to go to schools, mm-hmm. is that affected by home rule? Or is that a separate?
No, because they passed that via referendum. Yep, so that should not be affected.
Okay, thank you.
Ron? There was a time when we were slightly under the set number, and the city challenged it after the census. Does the city have any intention to try and challenge the current number?
We're still talking about those things, Gail, and we still have time. There are some lawsuits around the country right now, specifically with college towns that have a heavy college presence that are challenging it, because the count was done in April, as you know, and that's of 20 when students weren't here. So we do think the count is low. However, I'm not confident at this point that doing a special census would get us over the 25,000. That's a big,
Yeah.
there's a big
Mhm.
decline that we would have to get over, and I'm not sure that there were that many people miscount or not uncounted.
If the referendum passed, that would be it. We would not have to re-vote it every.
Nope, exactly. We're good.
Right.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions that people would like to ask? Please put them in the Q&A or the chat.
You can also raise your hand, and Jennifer can let you in to speak if you'd rather do that than write it down.
Well,
Here.
I don't see any other questions.
Oh, yes, there is one here. Let's see. I gotta figure it out here. Just a minute. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. It's from Jane Adams. Since sales tax can be approved by referendum, why not just do it that way?
That's an option for a non-home rule community.
But you could not do the rental registration, and that type of thing could not be voted on by referendum, could it?
No.
It's just the tax part.
Yep.
Okay.
Are there places where people can go to learn more about the whole issue of home rule and Carbondale? And
Yep. Yeah, we'll I have an info sheet that I'll be putting on our website this week. And so if you go to City of Carbondale's website, we'll have a tab on there for home rule FAQ, and then we'll have a lot of information I gave this afternoon.
It looks like a couple of people did raise their hands, so we could go ahead and see if Tamiko Mueller, I'm going to allow you to talk, so go ahead and ask your question. You'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Hi. So I had a question in reference to the sales tax and the property tax affecting the permanent residents here in the community of Carbondale. And if it will, do you see that as a concept of a mass exodus of the permanent residents here because of the increase? Or do you think it won't affect anything as far as the permanent residents for Carbondale?
You mean, Tamiko, you mean with our existing taxes?
Correct. Mm-hmm. And moving forward.
So if all of our taxes stay the same?
Yes, and if there is an increase in the future, but yes, currently.
That argument has been made for years and years and years, and you know, I haven't seen any data that shows causation between our tax rate and people leaving. But although I do think it's a valid argument.
Yeah, thank you.
Does the Municipal leave website have information on home rule?
They do. They have some information there, and then there's also, they put out a publication that really gets into a lot of the legalese and specific areas of home rule powers and why those are granted. So yes, that's a good resource.
right.
Someone wanted to know, well, let's see. I can maybe combine some of these. If the referendum failed, how soon could it be brought back on the ballot? The next election cycle?
Yeah, 2 years, the next election.
2 years, okay. Do you expect any organized resistance to the referendum?
We at this time, no, but if you look around Illinois, the Realtors Association is typically one particular lobbying group that opposes home rule, more so around the collar counties of Chicago, because transfer taxes, impact fees, a lot of things that hit developers and property owners there that we don't have here. But considering we're 70% rental, I would expect that there will be some pushback from the Realtors Association. And because of the registration, I mean, Realtors Association generally, it's not just the taxes, it's the rental registration, crime-free housing, those types of things that you cannot do if you're a home rule or a non-home rule community.
The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, and we do not take a position. We do position papers in that we look at pros and cons, but we do not take a stand on political issues. Let's see, what else do we have on this? In the chat, Diana Sussman has posted the website for the Municipal League, the 2 places to go to. So if you look in your chat, that will give you both of those. And can everyone see the chat? Do you have you hover down at the bottom and of your Zoom screen, and it will pull it up. It should show it. And also you can contact the public library. They'll have that information. Is that right, Diana?
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Any more comments?
Well, I want to thank people for participating in today's discussion. And again, if you're still questions about the issue, seek the information that was posted on the Municipal League. And I want to thank Gary Williams for helping us to understand this situation, which I think we will probably get a lot more information about before the referendum. Anyway, so I thank you all for coming today. And we will be doing it online with the help of the library every month on the first Wednesday. Our programs won't be on the same thing, but if you would like to join us, please look for that invitation and link. Thank you from the League of Women Voters of Jackson County. Thank you, Gary.